Hey friends, welcome back. Now, this time we're gonna dive deeper into ranking in Power BI and also how to apply dynamic ranking using parameters. So let's get into that. Let me just rename this maybe as time intelligence. Time intelligence. Of course, feel free to name this differently if you want. And then let me click on the plus symbol here and let's actually explore here now the ranking I was talking about. So let's actually have a look at our orders table, and in our orders table I have a category here. So if I take this category just to visualize it, I can see here the various categories, and if I take a look at one of the measures, and in my case I will go with the total sales scan, but you can also use any other kind of measure if you want. But I will go to total sales, and then I also go to the formatting option and increase the size of the values so you can hopefully see that better on your screens. So let me go with 14 again. Okay, like that. So far so good. Now we can see we got categories here, okay, condiments, cookies, and so on, and we can see their total sales numbers in here. And of course, if you would like to do that, we can easily sort them. So you go to the sorting button, we would see that drinks are the ones with the highest amount of sales, and cookies are the ones with the lowest amount of sales. So that works, right? But how can we now apply a ranking to them? That, for instance, drinks would be 1, cheese would be number 2, desserts number 3, and so on. That's what I want to apply and want to create here. So let me just maybe remove the format for now, the sorting for now, just to have it, or let's actually go with the categories maybe and have it randomly sorted here. Okay, just alphabetically here. Okay, so how can we do this? Well, let's explore this. Let's right click on a measures table and create a new measure in here. Now this is our measure, and let's call this ranking. Ranking measure is equal to, and in Power BI there's a so-called rank x function. Rank x, this one here. So if you pay close attention, you see that again it's ending with an x, and functions ending with an x normally mean that this function is an iterator function. An iterator again means, remember that we are iterating, so meaning we're going row by row through a table. Okay, let's do that. Let's actually press tab to start. And the ranking table, because it's an iterator function, the first argument will always be a table. And this is true for all the iterating functions. And then we can give it an expression, value, order, and ties. Even though the last 3 arguments are optional, that's why they are in brackets. So returns the rank of an expression evaluated in the current context in the list of values for the expression evaluated for each row in a specific table. So that sounds, well, a little bit intimidating, but let's actually figure out how that works. So for the table, let's say we use the orders table, right? So orders table, well, yeah, we want to iterate through the orders table because the orders table contains the, in this case, categories, right? Okay, let's try that. Let's use the orders table, and as an expression, I will use my total sales because this is the expression I want to use for the ranking. If you want to apply this for total profit or total cost, then this would be, of course, the expression you're going to use. Now let's say total, in this case, sales. Okay. And then for the value, we can skip this argument. But for the order, I would like to sort this descending because I'd like to see the highest amount of sales should be ranking number 1. That's why I say descending. And then you can type in here how to handle ties. You can either use dense or skip. The difference is if you would have, in this case, 2 categories with exactly the same amount, then dense would mean both of them have then the same ranking, and the one following would have then the next number. For instance, you have twice number 2, and the following one would be number 3. If you use skip, this would mean that the 2 of them have, for instance, ranking number 2, and the next one following would have ranking number 4. So that means that the number 3 is skipped because we have twice number 2. This is the difference. So let's use dense. That's fine, because in this case it doesn't really matter because they are all different, those numbers. So let's close this here, and then let's actually evaluate that. Okay, ranking. And now let's have a look in here, and then let's actually check the box for ranking just to see what it gives us. And this obviously is not really correct, right? Because here we can see a ranking is 1 for all the rows, including the total row here as well. So now the question is, what happens? and why is the ranking not correct. Now, one thing you always need to remember is that each visual, may it be a table or may it be any other kind of visual, has a context, a so-called filter context. And that means here the context is the category. So we have category cheese, and this means that the data inside the orders table is filtered to this category, cheese. So we only have the rows with cheese. Now, of course, if we only have the rows with cheese, so if we only have one category, then of course the ranking of this category is number 1, because the other categories are already filtered out. They are not taken into account. That is the problem here. So we need to modify our ranking. And to do this, let's go back to the ranking here. We can change actually what we have here. So instead of using the orders table here, which means that we use the table but have the filter context applied here, we need to get rid of the filter context. Now, of course, we can use calculate, but here we actually want to modify the table. Calculate is not a table modifier. Calculate can only change, in this case, calculations like expressions, for instance, total sales. But for tables, we have another option. We can use something we already used before. We could either use all selected, or we could also use the all function. So if I use all here, let's actually show what it does. All needs a table name or a column name. And it returns all the rows in the table or all the values in a column, ignoring any filters that might have been applied. So that's the keyword here. So it can return all the values in a column, so all the categories in our case, and it ignores the filters which are in each row. So that means if I say all, and then I'm referring to categories here, or the table category, like that, this means that now the ranking will be done on all the categories, and not only the specific category we have in each row. So even though we have cheese, for instance, the first row, when it's doing the ranking, it's considering all the categories. So it ignores the filter context here and takes instead all the categories into account. And that's exactly what we need, because then we can evaluate the total sales for all the categories and then figure out what is the ranking of the current one we have in here. So let's do that. Let's actually execute our modified formula, press enter. And now you see we got correct numbers here. So starting from 1 with the drinks, which is the highest amount, then cheese is the second highest amount, and so on. And if you would sort this by total sales, you'll see that this is exactly the correct ranking. So let's actually switch back here, maybe to the category here, but you see that this is now correct. So let's actually go back to the ranking, and just to format this, I'll probably just press Shift Enter and add it to a new line. That's fine. Press Enter, and we got our ranking calculated. So far, so good. Now, one additional thing is, if we take a closer look, we got also ranking for the total, right? And yeah, I mean, this is fine because the total sum is the highest amount, so it should be 1 for the ranking. That's true. But still, I mean, normally you don't want to have a ranking on the total column. So you have various options. You can either, of course, using here inside the visualizations pane on the formatting option and simply don't display the total for the table, or we can get rid of the 1. So let me show you the second option. And this again works with the blank, which you already covered, right, in other videos. But it works a little bit differently, because this time I'm going to show you another way. We could say, let me actually maybe move this a little bit down so we have more space on top. So let's go back to our ranking here. There's the measure. And now we could say the following. Because there's no way to prove whether something is blank, right? This does not really work. But what we could say is we could check whether it is in scope. So we use the if function again, if, and we'll use the normal if function here. And the logical test if is in scope. Here it is. The is in scope function is referring to a column name and returns true when the specific column is in a level in a hierarchy of levels. So what this actually means is, if we check for is in scope for the category, you need to spell it correctly. So we simply check whether it is actually showing a category, which is true for all the values in here, but which is not true for total. Because total includes all the categories, right? So there is no scope. It is not in scope of the category itself. And this is why the isInScope function here returns false for the total row, but true for all the other rows. So we could say only if it is in scope, then we would calculate the ranking. And if this is not the case, then I would return simply a blank. Like that. So kind of similar as we've done before, but this time with a new function, which is called isInScope. And by the way, there's another function you could also use, which is has_one_value. So isInScope and has_one_value could both be used to check whether category orders table is actually in scope or has a value, and the value or the result of the formula would be the same. You could use both. But isInScope is actually, as far as I know, a little bit better regarding performance. That has_one_value, that's why I'm going with isInScope. But the other option would be has_one_value. So if I remove this and say has_one_value, here it is, this function here, this would also work. But let's stick to isInScope, as I said, isInScope. And this is our formula here. So let's evaluate that just to make sure that what I told you is correct. And you see that now the 1 here is gone, right? While the ranking for the other is still in place, exactly the same. So last thing to do here is simply copy everything, go to our formatting option here, and then I go to new and I paste it inside, press format, let it do its magic, and there it is. Let me copy this and go back to my report, and I will paste it inside. Okay, so that looks a little bit easier to read. I press enter, and we got our ranking in here. So far so good. That's what I meant when I said we do a ranking. And if you remember correctly, or can remember what I said at the beginning, we also want to cover how to do a dynamic ranking regarding the parameters. So what if parameter, to be precise. So how does that work? Okay, so let's go to insert here. And let's just see under insert. Oh, sorry, let's go to modeling here. And here we have the option to create a new parameter. So let's do that. Let's click on what if parameter here. And then call this, let's call this ranking parameter. You can name this whatever you like, but it's just a name I'll give it here. It is a whole number, that is fine. The minimum is, in this case, let's say at least show 1. And the maximum, I mean, in this case, we only have 8 categories, so let's go with 8, right? So here. And then the increment is 1, that's also fine. And I also want to add a slicer to the page. Okay, click OK. And then just a second. And now we have a new ranking parameter here, which we can use here, this slider, which shows you a number in here. You can also go in here and change this to a drop down or list. It's up to you. For me now, I just leave the slider as my ranking here. Like that. Okay, so the ranking parameter is there. But of course, currently it's not doing anything because it's not connected to the ranking here, right? To the table. And also, an additional thing I'd like to mention is what actually happens if you click on new parameter, what if? Well, take a look at the field list. So there is a new table which has been created called ranking parameter, which is exactly the one which we have created just a few seconds ago. So if I take this option, you see that there are actually 2 fields inside. Let me just click on it. Let's actually go to the data view. Let's have a look. Let me just select it one more time, ranking parameter. And you see, it's quite easy. It's just one table. And this table has simply the numbers from 1 to 8. So exactly our minimum and maximum value, which we specified. And the formula here is simply this one. It's also a DAX expression. It's just called generated series. And what it does is, meaning it starts at 1, it ends at 8 for the table, and it increments at 1. This is exactly what this function does. It creates a table from 1 to 8 with an increment of 1. So if you want to write this yourself, you can write it and create a table on your own. But that's actually what happens with the what if parameter. So let's go back to the report view, and now let's link the parameter to our formula here. So let's create maybe a new formula for that. Let's say right click on the measures table, new measure, and let's call this maybe selected ranking, okay, ranking. Or call it ranks to show or whatever. Yeah? Let's say equals, and now we simply check again. Let's say if, in this case, or let me actually name it the same as I named it before I updated the videos. I think it was 𝗏𝒂𝒏 sales. 𝗏𝒂𝒏 sales. Maybe it's easier for people who have taken the class and want to go back and then see the new videos with the same name. So 𝗏𝒂𝒏 sales equals to, and now I say if, and I simply check, not if eager, I will use the normal if function. If the logical test is the ranking, so which we create, so the ranking as a formula here, the measures ranking, is this less or equal to the selection from the parameter? And we called it ranking parameter, so let's search for ranking parameter, which is this one here, and the value. So if the ranking itself from 1 to 8 is less than the selection we have here in the parameter, only then we would like to see the total sales. So we can see, then we would like to display the total sales. And otherwise, we don't want to display anything, and we know that this simply means we return a blank. I can close this here, and then I will evaluate that just to make sure that this works. Let's have a look. Let's actually maybe take this here and also add this here. Let's actually add the, where is it? 𝗏𝒂𝒏 sales, there it is. Tick this option, and you'll see that now we only get 2 values here, which are the 2 highest ones. And if we increase it here to 3, we can see 3 values. So maybe let's sort this here. Let's do a sorting here like that. And we see that we got 3 values. If I select 4, we got 4 values. You can also edit the value here directly inside. So this works, 𝗏𝒂𝒏 sales. So what's left to do is to go back to the 𝗏𝒂𝒏 sales. Then I Control-C to copy everything, and I will paste it in my formatting option. Again, you don't have to do it, but I think it's easier also for your reference later on, so you can use that, and it's easier to you to understand the specific DAX measure which we have created. Okay, let me copy it, and let me go back to my report, and I paste this inside. So also let me know in the resources or in a comment from your side whether this is helpful to format this better correctly for you or not. I'm also interested in that, of course. So, okay, so we got a 𝗏𝒂𝒏 sales, and maybe you're interested, or just say, I don't want to see the blanks. Well, this is just because we got still our ranking in here as a column. So just as an example, if I copy this table, Control-V to paste it, so I have copied it, and if I would say I would like to remove the ranking in here, I remove it, then you would see that, if also, let me just remove the total sales here, then you would see that we only get exactly the amount of categories here we specified. And if I say 3, I would only see 3 of them, right? So it depends on what you have in the table, whether you see blanks like this here or not. But yeah, that's it for ranking in Power BI, as well as how to apply in this case, what if parameter in order to show maybe only a selection of values, which you can now give to your report consumer, and he or she has now the option to slice and dice and say exactly what he or she wants to see. Okay? So that's it for ranking. Hopefully you understood what we did, and I encourage you try it out yourself, and also feel free, of course, to take a look at the specific Power BI report, which I have here, which is of course available in the resource section. So that's it for this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.